We're pleased to welcome you to the AUSA Noon Report, our virtual series featuring senior Army leaders providing important updates on key defense topics. Our host today is AUSA's Vice President for NCO and Soldier Programs and the 15th Sergeant Major of the Army, Dan Daly.
Good afternoon, and welcome to the Association of the Army's Noon Report. We're very glad you've joined us today, and we appreciate your continued support for our programs and events. I'd like to give a brief introduction of our special guest today. Sergeant Major Robert Haney serves as the Army Talent Management Task Force NCO Initiatives Team Lead. He has over 25 years of service in the infantry. And Major Jed Hudson joined the Army Talent Management Task Force in 2019 and is currently developing enlisted talent management initiatives. He has over 15 years of service as a logistics officer. For more details of their many accomplishments, decorations, and assignments, you can access the full bios of Sergeant Major Haney and Major Hudson in the handout tab on the upper right-hand corner of your screen. As a reminder, ladies and gentlemen, if you have questions today for Sergeant Major Haney and Major Hudson, please use the Q&A tab and post your questions in the box at the lower right-hand side of your screen. We'll try our best to get to as many questions as we have time for today, and we will get the conversation started with a fireside chat and then address questions from the audience. So please start thinking about what you want to ask as we welcome Sergeant Major Robert Haney and Major Jed Hudson. Gentlemen, welcome to the Noon Report today.
Thanks, SMA.
Thanks, SMA. It's an honor to be here.
Well, it's an honor and a pleasure. I know that you guys have been very busy supporting the Chief of Staff of the Army's People First strategy, working on enlisted talent management, along with the entire talent management task force. So we appreciate your efforts. Gentlemen, I thought before we get started, in support of the SMA's This Is My Squad initiative, Sergeant Major Grinston often says it's important to get to know our people. It's an important part of This Is My Squad. So if you could, for our listeners out there, share a little bit about yourself, and where you grew up and why you joined the Army.
Thanks, SMA. So I was born in Hawaii. Both my parents were in the Navy. My dad was a submariner for 20 years. My mom worked on aviation for about 4 years. So, and when we moved into Nevada, and that's where I grew up, majority of my life. I grew up in a small town that was surrounded by an Army ammunition depot, and the town was very patriotic, and it was always that feeling that I was going to join the military. And actually, after my senior year of high school, and actually after the summer, I went up to Hawthorne, Nevada, which is about 2 hours away, where the recruiter was at. And I'd gone up there to go and join the Army that day, went to go join the Marine Corps that day. Went up to the Marine Corps recruiter. And my mom had dropped me off, and she was going to go shopping, and went up, pulled on the door. The door was locked. Looked around. Kind of looked inside. They looked like they were closed up for either lunch or for the day. Looked next door, and there was the door to the Army recruiter was open. Walked inside, and a couple hours later, a motivated Sergeant First Class had enlisted me into the infantry. So from there, went to Fort Benning, Georgia, and the rest, 25 years later, I'm still here, doing great things for the Army.
Well, we appreciate him. We're glad that the Marine Corps recruiting station was closed that day, because we got a great soldier. And just a testament, I know that the recruiting commander, who's been on our show previously, be happy to hear that the Army recruiting station was wide open during that time and got a great soldier. Major Hudson, how about your story, sir?
So SMA, I was born in New York, but lived in a handful of states across the East Coast. However, I actually spent most of my childhood pretty close to here. I grew up in Springfield, Virginia. There's not any one particular thing. I always knew I wanted to join the Army. I always knew I wanted to be a soldier. A little added push from my family's military service. My grandfather, he spent a career in the Army and served, and my grandmother's brother was killed in the Korean War. So I always wanted to follow in their footsteps and serve and sacrifice as they did.
Well, thank you, sir, for sharing your story. And Sergeant Major, thank you. So talent management, very important subject, as I said earlier, in support of the Chief of Staff of the Army's People First strategy. This team's been working on this for some time, and it's actually a few months ago, we did a podcast series on some of the upcoming initiatives that you are about to get into with the Enlisted Talent Management Task Force. Now, the Greater Talent Management Task Force, formerly known as the Officer Talent Management Task Force, is how it started, has been going for some time. And the Enlisted Talent Management Task Force has now joined the Talent Management Task Force to work on the enlisted talent management initiatives. It's a lot of talent management. So I'd invite our audience to go back and check out that podcast. It's at ausa.org on the Army Matters podcast series. And we'll have a great discussion with Sergeant Major Haney and Major Hudson about enlisted talent management. But gentlemen, could you give us an update from that podcast on the initiatives that we talked about and that you were getting ready to start? Give us an update on how those things have been going.
SMA, so I want to talk about the two things that we've kind of moved forward with from that time. The first one was the First Sergeant Talent Alignment Assessment, which is really a job placement assessment run at division or installation level to look at those master sergeants and really senior sergeant first classes and look to see how they would fit into the right job at the right time. And really not taking away from those leaders that are already making those decisions, but to do an assessment and provide more data, granular data and understanding of the soldiers and the actual positions, and really build a local market on that installation so they can manage their master sergeants into those first sergeant positions. And honestly, it's really to build out a bench so they can manage their NCOs and build some succession planning into place. So we executed a pilot there on Fort Bragg with some 18th Airborne Corps elements and 82nd. It was about 13 master sergeants that went through the process, and 99% of them said it was a great initiative, and they felt that it had a more holistic look at an NCO to match up with those positions. And then really we moved forward after that and moved back to the SMA and the SEC, and they said to continue to move forward. So we're looking at pilots in 1st ID, 10th Mountain, and later on in this year, possibly going up to Alaska. Additionally, after the pilot or the prototype we did with SMAP last year, we are really looking forward to doing an SMAP this year. The decision was made on 4 February that we would do a full brigade implementation of SMAP. So the Sergeant Major's assessment, similar to BCAP and ZCAP, assessing those brigade level Sergeant Majors for future CSL assignments.
Excellent. Thank you, Sergeant Major. And Major Hudson, before we go to you for an update on the initiatives you've been working on since our podcast, I'm told that your mother is actually watching today, and I wanted to give you an opportunity and hopefully not make a mistake to not say hi to your mom while you're on TV.
Well, thank you, SMA. I appreciate that. So, Mom, I believe you're out there today, so thank you for all your love and support over the years. Thank you for joining today and watching, and I love you very much. Thanks, SMA.
Can you give us an update, Major Hudson, on the initiative?
So our two biggest ones are the First Sergeant Talent Alignment Assessment and the Sergeant Major Assessment Program, like Sergeant Major Haney just said. The Sergeant Major Assessment Program, while we're going to start with brigade level this upcoming November, it will expand to battalion level for the following year. And so now we're going to have an opportunity to really use objective assessments to complement the current subjective evaluations that are already used as we select battalion and brigade command sergeants major. Other things we have coming up. So most people watching are probably familiar with the assignment satisfaction key enlisted module ASCM. That is HRC's program, but it's up and running fully now. So when we talked with you last time, it was just getting started for full implementation, but now it's in its second full iteration. And this cycle, I believe there's approximately 9,000 non-commissioned officers that are going to PCS based off of this. This is their preferences matter. The soldier has transparency, can see all the jobs available, and the soldier has predictability on when they're going to move. And they have this year, month available to move that they didn't have prior to ASCM. After that, we, as IPSA comes on board for the Army, we will look to expand this ASCM concept and build off the success of the officer marketplace for PCS moves that happened recently. So we're going to have a marketplace for senior non-commissioned officers. It will likely start at the E8 level, but we're still working out specifics there. And this will now allow the non-commissioned officer to provide their preferences, the command to provide their preferences, and the preferences determine the slating on who goes where. So it's not just that your preference matters. Now your preference, coupled with the preference of the organization, are the things that matter. And the preference of the individual will be weighed slightly higher. And then going further, we're also looking to expand into the realm of junior non-commissioned officer promotions.
Thanks for that update, Major Hudson. And I know the ASCM is a much anticipated thing from the community and from leadership, to be able to give our non-commissioned officers for the first time really in the history of talent management and the enlisted force an opportunity to give their preference. But this is not easy science. This is complex work, right? So because there's a lot of things that drive assignments. So what's the likelihood of me getting my first choice?
So with the initial runs of ASCM, there was approximately 25% of the NCOs got their first choice, and I believe 55% got one of their top 5 choices. It will come down to does the individual make wise preferences? That has a huge factor in it. I actually just spoke with an individual who's going through the current cycle of ASCM, Master Sergeant George Turner, who is currently with 2nd SFAB. He ended up getting his first choice, going to AFRICOM. And one thing he told me, though, is that you still have to preference based on what skills you have. Are you qualified for the job? And is it right for your career? So if you are only preferencing based off location, especially junior NCOs who may not understand the career implications as much, there's a chance that they will not set themselves up for success with the preferencing.
Absolutely. Well, I appreciate the update, Major Hudson, Major Haney. So what's next? What's next for the Talent Management Task Force?
So SMA, we're going into a planning conference in March, and we're really going to start looking at some of those other big initiatives that we can start moving forward. As Major Hudson was talking about, really looking at a marketplace in addition to ASCM, and really starting to build that out to where, you know, those unit to individual NCOs matching can happen, where the units are really preferencing what KSBs are important to them, and really what KSBs the soldier has, and matching those up. And then really over time, looking at that so we can put the right NCOs into the right jobs. Additionally, it doesn't take away that there's, you know, the Army requirements. So the Army manning guidance is always going to have a lot of input into this. So, and there's a lot of movers in the NCO Corps. So it might be a layered market where junior NCOs, staff sergeants, and sergeants might have looks more like ASCM, where it's a preferencing model, and really kind of those positions are identified by KSBs, up to those master sergeants where we can start doing some of the matching. Also, as we go into this planning conference, Major Hudson had mentioned the junior NCO promotions. Sergeant Major Grinston often asks me over and over, or not even asks, tells me, or how to.
That's how it happens most of the time. Yeah.
Yes. How do we get better staff sergeants? And that's a really complicated question, because it's, you know, it starts from way at the beginning of when we're bringing soldiers in the Army to, you know, to the development of the staff sergeants, to the assessments of staff sergeants, to their understanding of, you know, of their jobs, and really identifying what's important about those jobs. So it's not a instant answer that we're going to be able to come up with. I think we need to do a lot of work throughout the whole enterprise to really develop a way forward on that.
Just note about that marketplace. So what it does is it takes the assignment manager out of the process as far as the decision authority. The assignment manager remains in the process as far as an advisor and a mentor to the individuals that are moving. And again, so now you open it up, and the moves are based on talent. The marketplace, the commodity being traded in the marketplace, is talent. You have buyers and the sellers of it, so to speak. And it allows people to really have transparency on all the talent available, the individual to have transparency on all the assignments available. And what we found from the officer marketplace, the very first one that went through, that had over 13,000 movers in it, 47% got their top choice. We think that there's no reason that the non-commissioned officer marketplace won't be able to emulate that type of success.
Absolutely. And I think you hit on an important point, Major Hudson. And we talked about this during our podcast, is we're not taking talent management away from the chain of command, are we?
No, absolutely not. So a great example is the First Sergeant Talent Alignment Assessment. That's our top talent management priority. The Sergeant Major of the Army has said that First Sergeants is the critical rank that he wants to focus on. And a question we get all the time is, well, this program, will this turn this into a centralized selection system to where local commanders no longer have the authority to assign to pick their first sergeants? And it's absolutely not the case at all. This is not like a command selection list or anything that you see for battalion command. What we are giving local commanders, we're giving them something that they don't already have, but they still get to make the decision. So one, we're giving them the tools to make an informed decision. There's an assessment battery that measures a whole realm of attributes for the individual. So things like ethics and decision-making, general intelligence, and so forth. It measures a whole series of things. So we're now collecting that information through an assessment battery. And then we're also looking at their behaviors through a behavior-based interview and trying to target leadership in particular with that behavior-based interview. Coupling that with a physical assessment, and now we have all the normal data that we used to have through record brief information, so evaluations, military schools, their MOS and civilian schooling and everything else. We have that information, but now we're coupling it with these objectives assessments, giving that to the decision makers. They still have the authority to make the decision, but they have the information to make an informed decision. And then the second thing that it gives these local leaders is it opens the talent aperture for them. So oftentimes a brigade would slot their first sergeants based on the talent that they received. And they were stuck with that, especially with low density MOSs. You might only have one fill in the blank MOS, and that's the person who needs to go into that first sergeant slot. Well, now if you expand this across an installation or division, you've opened that talent aperture. You're allowing people to compete for positions that maybe they didn't even know were open or they wouldn't have been able to compete for again. And the local commander still has the authority to make that decision, but just now with some tools to make a better decision along the way.
And I would actually like to expand on that just a little bit. While we were running the first sergeant TA pilot there on Fort Bragg, I ran into a sergeant major she was helping administer one of the physical fitness events. And after talking through this and explaining the process to her, she was 100% on board with and thought that this is the way it should be. She was stuck in a job for 1.5 years as a master sergeant in a unit that didn't reach outside of the battalion or reach outside that brigade. They wouldn't advocate for her to get a first sergeant job on the installation. So she felt that it almost put her behind almost by 2 years or 1.5 years to 2 years because she couldn't compete. Once it finally came up, somebody came in and replaced her. She went out and got a first sergeant job and ended up at the Sergeant Major Academy. But she felt that not having that visibility across the installation really kind of set her behind a little bit.
And then just one more small piece. So the marketplace actually is greatly increasing the authority given to local commanders. So now their preference really matters in it. They are a hiring authority. And again, the assignment manager is now in a advising role. So again, I don't think these talent management initiatives take anything away from local commanders. And it's quite the opposite.
Sounds to me gives them more authority, really, and power.
Absolutely.
Because they can see across a larger spectrum, look at a broader opportunity for talent within the organization. And like we said before we started today, and we've heard many times, it's the right person at the right time for the right job. And and we have to match that with their career progression. So
talent management covers the whole career of somebody. You have to get the right people, but you also have to train them and develop them, employ them properly. Their preferences matter for that employment. And then we have to keep the right folks as well. So it covers all this. And I think local commanders will have much more ability to do that with these tools.
yeah, talent management, important part of the Army's people first strategy. And ladies and gentlemen, as a reminder, if you have a question for the team today, still plenty of time, go ahead and click on the Q&A tab and post your question there. And you can also vote on questions that I've already posted to move them to the top. We're going to get to those questions right after my final question for Sergeant Major Haney. I got to ask Sergeant Major, because I am a huge fan of the 16th SMA's initiative. This is my squad. How does this all fit together?
SMA, so I really see this fitting together for a couple different reasons. And we can start really with the first sergeant talent alignment assessment. The first sergeant, putting the right first sergeant into those positions, really, that company level first sergeant really coaches and teaches and mentors and puts those squad leaders into those right positions throughout those companies and really kind of mentors those squad leaders and platoon sergeants. So I think, putting the right first sergeants into place often helps. Additionally, as we kind of looked at the process here and looked across the board, is doing these types of assessments, we're really highlighting those knowledge and skills and those behaviors that are not counterproductive. I think the Army is getting after some of the 3 corrosives, and I think some of these things we're not targeting that are going to fix those, but having the right NCOs with the right characteristics and behaviors really gets after some of those things and those understandings. Additionally, taking a holistic approach across a NCO's career, and we haven't spoke about it yet, but a career of assessments where you come in the Army and you're taking the TAPAS test and some of those things identify some of those attributes, and then at BLC, SLC, and ALC. There's TRADOC's been working on things that are behavioral, that are developmental type of assessments that are going to give you insights. So as you can take some of these predictive assessments like TAPAS or NSAB, where you can also do developmental type assessments with Project Athena and throughout the NCO's careers, and then go back to these predictive type of assessments like the first sergeant TAA or the SMAP, where you'll actually understand your behaviors throughout your career and really start to put the right NCOs into the right positions.
So the introduction of the task force allows the chain of command to be able to integrate all these things so they stay connected, right? And I'm sure that you work with the This Is My Squad team and the other teams, HRC, the personnel managers, IPSA A team, to make sure that we're incorporating all these initiatives so they're simultaneously headed in the same direction. Yeah, that's great.
Absolutely.
SMA, hands down, I work weekly, almost daily with Sergeant Major Lynn in Timms and Sergeant Major Levine in Timms, and we have a lot of crosstalk throughout the week on how we support them and how their initiatives are supporting back towards NCO talent management.
That's an excellent update on This Is My Squad and People First Strategy. Let's go out to our audience for questions. Again, thank you for sending your questions in. The first one I think is very important because we talk total Army all the time. And the first one is, will some of these NCO initiatives transition to the Reserve or National Guard? And if so, which ones and when?
SMA, so I'll first, last year when we ran the prototype, we had one reserve TPU soldier that came to the SMAP prototype. And we're constantly, I've been in communication with Sergeant Major Lombardo and his team on how we'll integrate some possibly into this year's SMAP. And additionally, I had talked to Sergeant Major Sampa and their team on when we're up there doing the first sergeant TAA at First ID, is seeing how we can integrate them into some of these assessments. So that's just two of the things. We really need to work through how the reserves and the National Guard would actually utilize some of these assessments. But I think the career of assessments is going to provide great insights into our reserve soldiers and our National Guard soldiers, because they have a lot of unique capabilities, and especially with IPSA coming online, where we're going to be able to capture all those unique capabilities and actually be able to reach in and data mine's probably not the right word, but gather all those for those unique skills.
Yeah,
so I think there's a lot of opportunity for Reserve and National Guard. It is a total Army look at this right now.
We have a Reserve Sergeant Major that actually just started working with our team to help us as we look to expand these out. So the goal is always to expand talent management across the total Army whenever possible.
Yeah, and I think a key point, Sergeant Major, you brought up was, when we bring IPSA online and we still really start looking at the total capabilities of talent management, looking at the skills, not just the skills you do as a soldier, but the other skills you have. That's the treasure, is the National Guard and Reserve. They bring incredible skills to the fight that are incredibly useful during just both peacetime and for combat operations. So,
absolutely. And you need, as you were alluding to, SMA, you need the self-professed talent to be able to show itself. And if we only rely on Army certifications for identification of that talent, then we're going to be missing substantial talent along the way. So one of the great things about the marketplace going forward and the First Sergeant Talent Alignment Assessment, both of those incorporate self-professed talent. Like these are my hobbies. This is what I'm interested in. This is what I study on my free time, because that's a good indication of what you're really good at too.
Well, gentlemen, I know, and Major Hudson specifically, that the Officer Talent Management has been working a lot on mentorship and teaching and coaching, not just individually from leader to subordinate, but also within the education field. Are there plans to do that for the enlisted talent management? So in the MLC, SLC, to add coaching?
Yeah, so I think we still have a ways to get there as far as updating some of that curriculum. The Army coaching program, it's the NCOs that have access to it right now are the ones that are going through our assessment program. So if you go through the Sergeant Major assessment program, then you will have access to the Army coaching program. I do think as the Army coaching program expands out and matures over time, there's very likely opportunities there across professional military education for non-commissioned officers.
And actually, SMA, I had talked to the Nick Laco Sergeant Major last week, and really that is being incorporated into curriculum. I know there's some movement forward within the talent management task force to really look at maybe an ASI, or there's a training plan and incorporating an ASI for coaching. And that's still making its way through the talent management task force as an initiative. But hands down, like the coaching and the mentorship is going to be different from counseling, and really training those instructors and training people to be coaches is really a way forward. And I think that's key for the future.
Excellent. Our next question, actually, and I'm glad he wrote one in because I know that there's international collaboration for talent management. And the question comes from our UK brothers, from Colin. He says, good afternoon from the UK, British Army Talent Management Team here. Sergeant Major Assessment Grade Initiative. How do you intend to measure the success of the assessment program? That is a great question. All great ideas, great things, great initiatives, but you got to be able to gauge a metric. Gentlemen, can you tell us how we're going to do that?
SMA, so it is a longitudinal study for the whole CAP program, is really looking at how and developing those metrics on how we're going to measure that over time. I can't answer the specifics because it's ongoing with the entire BCAP, CCAP, and now SMAP program on how we're going to measure that over time. But I think you can think of those things that are looking at command climate. You can look at those things that are where officers and commanders and sergeant majors are actually having a positive influence on readiness over time. So it's going to take a couple of years as these senior officers and NCOs go through this assessment and they've finished command before we actually start to see the fruits of our labor. Well, I stand corrected. We see the fruits of our labor now as they're getting ready to go into it, but
you'll be able to accurately measure
it over time. There is a long-term plan that the CAP team is actually working on.
Major, I know you want to respond, but I got to jump on it because Mr. Colin sent in from UK is because I want our audience to really understand how broad this is across three components: United States Army, right? But also internationally. Can you share just a little bit of the work that we're doing with our foreign counterparts like the UK?
Yeah, so just from talent management perspective, we regularly have meetings with allied nations, their human resources managers and talent management managers. We usually we do it around the time of AUSA's annual conference, as we do one of our big meetings with them, and we share lessons learned on how we get after things, and it covers the gamut of everything from what needs to happen legally in a country in order to move talent management forward to just best practices and managing individuals.
And we had a contingent of a couple foreign GOs that had came to BCAP and CCAP that saw the process.
Excellent. Yeah. Well, back to our next question. Does the Army plan to have a traveling First Sergeant TAA team come to each division to run the First Sergeant TAA program, or will there eventually be a single point location for Master Sergeants, First Sergeant promotable to go for the assignment? So I guess more simply is, are we going to do this centralized, or are we going to distribute this in the future?
So I'll take that on first, SMA. So initially up front, we're going to have a team that travels around that does initial training. In the long term, we see this incorporated into things where the units start running them, incorporated possibly into the commandant's course on how to run this, so that then the academies at the installations can run it. Additionally, is putting this understanding of assessments and these understandings of the First Sergeant TAA into and the running of behavioral-based interviews into PME. And possibly really focusing back on the sergeant majors and development of that program. The long term of the First Sergeant TA, there will be a small contingent within the Talent Management Task Force or the CAP program to help keep those things moving. But at the end of the day, it's going to be back on the divisions and the installation. That's why I really say it's a tool that we're providing. Once we've fully developed this, it's a tool we're providing to those divisions and installations, those leaders to use to assess their master sergeants for first sergeant positions.
I think an important question too, Sergeant Major, too, is because you talked a lot about First Sergeant TAA, and this is one that came in previously, was if you compete in TAA, does that guarantee you a position? So when we do decentralize this out to divisions, it's finally up and running, just because you put yourself in the hat, are you guaranteed a job?
So actually, I'll turn it back over to you because it kind of really ties into the marketplace discussion.
Yeah. So we anticipate and we hope to expand this out to cover all E8 positions across an installation, because it really is talent alignment and it's really a localized marketplace as opposed to just selecting first sergeants, although that's how we're going to start. So to start, no, you will not be guaranteed a first sergeant position if your talent doesn't align to that particular troop, battery, or company that requires a first sergeant at that time. It's not anything against the individual. It's about what's best for the individual and what's best for the organization and the soldiers that fall under that organization. But as we expand this program out, then I think those that compete in it will find themselves aligned with a position where their talents best fit. Yeah, so I definitely I see it as those that compete will have access to positions, but it won't necessarily be guaranteed
To be a first sergeant position. Yeah.
And to expound off that a little bit, so we do see as going into a market, an open market, or for smaller MOSs where PAO. I just had a discussion with a sergeant major about PAO specifically. He has a very small population and he needs to manage those senior NCOs. Well, the first sergeant TAA will gather that granular data, and there might only be 1 or 2 PAO NCOs on an installation, but they would run something, and I'm not going to say it's CSL, but a first sergeant board, maybe at the proponent, where they can really, they're already doing it in some aspects, like PSYOPs, I think does their own, where they manage their first sergeants. I really think that this will provide that granular data to that group to really manage their first sergeant positions across their branch.
It will
or
enable succession planning too.
Yeah,
So you'll have a bench. You may not have been slotted for a particular position that you competed for right now, but you might be in line for that in the event that the individual holding that position has to leave quickly or something like that. So it provides you the opportunity to have succession planning for commanders. And again, you'll have the opportunity to work where your talents align.
So the basic number rules for size of an MOS still apply. I mean, so like you mentioned, Sergeant Major, MOSs and proponents for those MOSs have to fill key billets. A public affairs NCO, the senior non-commissioned officer division, is an essential part of the performance of that division. And sometimes they have to fill it, but that's not a bad thing, because that's also the right position for their forward progression, isn't it?
Right. And I think they can gather this and provide that to the proponent to help manage that. And it wouldn't always be back on that division or installation, because that might only be with the one NCO.
Absolutely. Well, staying on the subject of first sergeant TAA, Lyle W. Now, this is a very long and specific question, so I'll try to get it right. Lyle, I promise I'll do my best here. From a non-local perspective, how do master sergeants compete for or apply for first sergeant positions? And with the annual evaluation board providing an OML and Ask-EM, is there still a method of reaching out to brigade level CSMs in order to put your name in the hat for a first sergeant position in their unit? If so, is that able to influence assignment PCS moves?
So actually, the Sergeant Major of the Army has directed us to ensure that the program includes those that are not yet on an installation.
You should always listen to the Sergeant Major of the Army's directive.
Absolutely. So that's the short answer, is like, yes, it will include people that are not local. And it's not very hard to include them. So the first step is either ask them or the marketplace, and that's going to give them orders to move to a new installation. But as they know that they're going to go to that installation, right now the first sergeant talent alignment assessment has 3 main assessments in it. It has a physical assessment, it has an assessment battery I talked about before, and it has a behavior-based interview. Now we are still validating these tools to make sure that they are tailored exactly to what we're looking for. But there's no reason that an individual cannot partake of these assessments while they're not there. And those scores can be submitted to the alignment panel and be utilized so that when they arrive, they are already slotted to where their talents best align. So we absolutely plan. Now, right now, as we're doing pilots, it's only the local population. When this is implemented, it will include people that are inbound to an installation.
You want to add that?
And when he says scores, he really, it's not raw scores, it's talents, and really identifying those KSPs that would go to a gaining unit. And similar to a marketplace discussion, those units would be able to identify those KSPs for that that first sergeant position, and that first sergeant would be able to compete for that position. Very, very similar to the AIM-2 or ATAP type model now. That is a good ways down the road as we develop out this first sergeant TAA.
Excellent. Okay. Our next question comes from Amos S. From a talent management assessment, would it not be beneficial for a 360 assessment from a minimum of 5 to 10 subordinates, he says? And SRB and evals are a great starting tool, but in my opinion, it would add value.
So 100%. I will. We are currently in the development of a 270 or 360 degree tool where the individuals do not select the raters, the peers and subordinates, and but the Army can say these are your peers and subordinates at that time. And that is one of the key aspects of the first sergeant TAA, and that's one of the key aspects of the development of SMAP. Is I think a lot of senior officers have seen how ACIT works and how the ACIT process works. And how confidential that is to the whole process. We're developing that with NCOs this year. And actually, I'm preparing to send out an email to a bunch of brigade level sergeant majors asking for their input so I can do focus groups and work groups with ARI to develop that 270 degree assessment or ACIT-like tool for senior NCOs that's going to matriculate down to the first sergeant.
And so on that, if anyone watching ever receives a notification to fill out the Enlisted Leader Assessment Tool, which is what the Army Research Institute is currently developing and validating for us, please go ahead and fill those out. They are going to be vital to all assessments for talent management.
They don't go in the survey box then, right? So
that's right.
Because we do get a lot of surveys.
That's right.
These are important.
It's purely anonymous, and the individual does not get to select the peers and subordinates that will fill it out. And the battalion commander and the colonel commander assessment programs have shown us that these are absolutely critical pieces of information for choosing key leaders.
Absolutely. So I'd like to go to another question, and with a topic I'm pretty passionate about, and I've done some personal study on. It comes from Alicia T. What measures are being considered to minimize the unconscious bias that are involved with the continuous human involvement with the selection process? This is a great subject. I had an opportunity with General Milley to sit in his office and listen to one of the nation's leading experts on unconscious bias, and it was an incredible, eye-opening conversation for me. So, gentlemen, comments.
So there's two that we're doing with NCOs specifically as it relates to SMAP and it relates to the first sergeant TAA. So the first one I'm going to cover is the first sergeant TAA. We've really looked at doing a behavioral-based interview, and during that behavioral-based interview, it's a double blind, and you are not actually looking at an individual. So I think some of your things that you probably discussed were, in an interview process, you spend this first 30-second taking a snapshot of you, and I spend the next 30 minutes really trying to justify my biases that I've already.
It's the reason we got rid of the photo, the primary reason, right? Unconscious bias.
Right. And
inside the promotion file.
So we're really using a double-blind behavioral-based interview with a standard rubric and questions to get at behaviors and to really get away from those biases of uniform, of race, of color, and those type of biases. So we aren't providing that to the behavioral-based interview. During the talent alignment process, we're looking at how we're going to really anonymize that data for actual talent alignment. We still have a ways to go on the development of that part, but the key is really the behavior-based interview to drive those behaviors.
Absolutely.
ACTI during the SMAP, BCAP, or CCAP is really just that. Those senior leaders sitting on one side of a double-blind panel and asking those standard questions. They have all they have is assessment data. They don't have individuals, SRBs, NCOERs, OERs. They don't have any identifying information. And really through that process is really ready for command or not ready for command, and some other scores that they give them that are not based off of any biases that we can determine.
Major Hudson, the next question I think is a good one for you, and it comes from Ted C. And it's a topic that Sergeant Major Haney mentioned earlier about our ability to assess this, and we got to be able to gauge it at the end and how we did. And I know that we have a long way to go because we're still developing it, but this is a very good question. Can you give some examples of the objective measures you mentioned earlier for assessments? As a follow-up, do you see people eventually gaming these measures in ways that result in a suboptimal behavior? So we have tried this throughout the history of managing talent in the Army, NCOERs, OERs. We won't say out loud what we've done, but we've done a lot of corrective measures to prevent some of that. And ultimately, we know people will try to steer through the system, and people are worried about that. Can you give us any input from what the officers have done or what you plan to do for the Talent Management Task Force to prevent that?
So the NCOERs, the OERs, those are subjective. It's an individual's opinion, generally the senior rater's opinion, and it matters a lot. By no means are we getting rid of subjective evaluations. That will still remain a critical component of selections, promotions, and so forth. However, the objective assessment, so now it's no longer someone's opinion, it's the same for everyone. The best example of an objective assessment for the Army is the Army Physical Fitness Test, which prior to coronavirus, we all had to take twice a year. That's one of the assessments. I don't think you can game the APFT, especially if the graders are calibrated and so forth, right? If we transition to the new ACFT, that's even harder to game that one, I would think, right? It's pretty clear what the standards are. It's pretty clear how to grade it correctly. When you look at some of these other objective assessments, so the assessment battery that's going to be used for the first sergeant talent line assessment, or other various cognitive and non-cognitive assessments that are used for the sergeant major assessment program or battalion commander assessment program, those, again, the way they're designed, it's really hard to game the system. So it might be a series of questions where there's no right answer. And it's not something that you can look up ahead of time and see what is the right answer when I am asked such and such a question. It's based on your personality. But after answering a whole bunch of those questions over time, it will pull trends out that I very much doubt any individual going through that could figure that out as you go through. It's too many questions. It'll ask you the same question too many times. And oftentimes you're having to choose between two undesirable choices. So it's seeing which one you choose under those circumstances. That's just one example of it. Also, it's designed in a way, the researchers have designed it to where the questions can be changed out. Again, I think there is a lot of fail-safes in place to ensure that you can't game it. For the behavior-based interview, it's asking about stuff that happened in your past, in your career. And the individual does not know what the questions are. The questions are changed as other individuals come in there. And so it'd be pretty hard outside of just prior to going in, just remembering a handful of significant events that happened in your career and the decisions you made and being prepared to talk that. Again, it'd be very hard to game it. And it's objective. It's objective because of lots of reasons. I've already said some, but another one is those that are using the tool. Those are like the panel members for the behavior-based interview. They are thoroughly and rigorously calibrated so that it is objective across the board. And it is not that if you got to panel 1, you were much more likely to be selected than if you went to panel 2. And so that's another way that we make them objective, as well as, changing the questions and so forth. And then the last piece is everyone who participates in any of these events, they sign non-disclosure agreements. I don't think there would be tremendous harm if they let some of the information get out just based on the controls that are in place. But that's one more control we have, is to tell people, hey, like, don't do this. Don't do anything that would undermine the integrity of this program after you've participated in it.
So it's safe to say, sir and Sergeant Major, that through this entire process and an excellent skill set that we have working on the talent management team, this is a forethought. They're looking at this and looking at ways to make it. Nothing is foolproof. Nothing is perfect, right? But a whole lot better than what we've had in the past. So, gentlemen, we're running out of time. One more question for each of you. And Sergeant Major, the first one for you, which is a great question, is will this filter down to junior non-commissioned officers? And are there initiatives upcoming to better manage talent at the junior level?
SMA, I mean, the easy answer is yes. As we move forward into March's planning conference, and really as we look at the career of assessments throughout an NCO's career. So it is all coming. So yes, it's going to continue. And the Chief of Staff of the Army, the people first is, I mean, he's invested in this, and we are moving forward with people first and really putting our money where our mouth is and doing these initiatives. This is going to continue.
Absolutely. Yeah. This People First is not a bumper sticker. It's reality. It's happening. Yeah. Major Hutch, I got to ask the question because I'm sure there's a lot of our enlisted audience out there asking the same. Why an officer on the Enlisted Talent Management Task Force? Why is it important?
So, first off, there's actually not an enlisted talent management task force. It's just the Army Talent Management Task Force. The Army Talent Management Task Force started with commissioned officer initiatives, expanded to warrant officer and enlisted. And so even though our enlisted team is only 7 individuals right now, we punch far above our weight because we get to use the expertise and the lessons learned from everyone else on the task force who have been working this stuff, the officer initiatives, for years. So we have tremendous subject matter experts and knowledge on things like assessments, data collection, storage, analytics, communications, so forth. And then why an officer on it? Well, first off, I'm extremely passionate about it. So back to the preferences, like my preference is to work on enlisted talent management right now. A lot of attention was going to officer talent management and not nearly as much attention was going to enlisted at the time. And I thought that's where I could put my talent to use. Number 2, it will impact me no matter what I do in my future career. I certainly hope to be a battalion commander, and then it will obviously impact me. But whatever I do, even just as a citizen of the country, the talent management of our enlisted personnel will have ramifications across the entire nation. And then lastly, I think enlisted talent management benefits from having the perspective of an officer, just like for battalion commander assessment program and colonel's commander assessment program, they have nominative command sergeants majors that provide insight to the panel members. Again, I think I can provide insight in a similar way to enlisted talent management.
Awesome. I always like to say it. This is not officer business, not NCO business. This is leader business.
Absolutely.
Talent management affects everybody from the junior level all the way to the most senior level. So, ladies and gentlemen, update for talent management, an important component of the Chief Staff of the Army's People First initiative. Thank you, Sergeant Major Haney and Major Hutchin, for that insightful conversation. Before we close, I want to inform our audience of some upcoming events to look forward to. Join us on 25 February for a Thought Leaders with James Carl Nelson, author of the York Patrol, the real story of Alvin York. On 10 March, join us for a noon report with Lieutenant General Laura A. Potter, Deputy Chief of Staff of the G2. On 24 March, we have Her Story, a U.S. Army panel discussion with authors Diane Carlson Evans and Kayla M. Williams and Shannon Huffman Polson. Mark your calendars, ladies and gentlemen, for Global Force Next, held virtually from 16 to 18 March. And I'm told that you got to get to registration before this Friday because the early bird will end this Friday. So go to AUSA.org and register for Global Force Next now. Save a couple bucks if you do it before Friday. And save the date for the 2021 AUSA annual meeting and exposition being held here in our nation's capital from 11 to 13 October at the Walter E. Convention Center downtown here in Washington, D.C. Ladies and gentlemen, for information about these and all the events that AUSA puts on throughout the year, please visit AUSA.org. And lastly, I'd like to thank our members. Those of you who are members, thank you. And those of you who are not, take a look at becoming a member. Membership helps support shows like you saw today, but also it helps support our soldiers and their families. Thank you again, ladies and gentlemen, and have a good day.